Mine is about the abortion issue. Maybe Alito didn't realize it, but the time that the Constitution was written, abortion was not illegal.
That's correct. In fact, Ben Franklin wrote a manual on how to do an abortion using herbs.
And the other thing that makes me worry is that there are going to be so many women who will not seek medical help because they're afraid if they can't go through the pregnancy, then they won't be able to do anything about it. And I've seen all sides of it, but it still comes down to it has to be the woman who decides. She knows her life, her circumstances, and every child that is born, I never hear them say that they have a right to have parents who love and want them.
Yeah, yeah.
Because living a life knowing you were never wanted, or you're shuffled around from foster home to foster home, and what are they doing for these children now? They don't want to pay for maternity care. They don't want to have maternity leave. They don't care if we have health insurance or anything. It is power and control, and it is cruelty towards women.
Yeah, I agree. Very, very well said, Brenda. Brenda, thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Have a good day.
Thank you. Let me just tell you a very quick story that has to do with Roe v. Wade that most people are unaware of. It's in my book on the Supreme Court, and I was amazed when I discovered it. I discovered it when I was doing the research for the book. You know, Lewis Powell, we condemn Lewis Powell as being, you know, the Powell Doctrine guy. He was this right-wing lawyer who his biggest client was the tobacco industry. He was in Virginia. This was back in the 70s, or in the 60s, actually. And in 1971, one of his best friends, a fellow by the name of Eugene Sindor, who was also his neighbor, his next-door neighbor, lived on his same street, was the chairman or president. I forget his title, but he was in charge of basically the business. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And Lewis Powell wrote this memo, you know, about how business needed to get together, how Ralph Nader was threatening America with communism and Silent Spring, Rachel Carlson, and all this kind of stuff. And the Powell Memo in 1971 kicked off the modern conservative movement. It brought together, you know, none of these think tanks, Heritage Foundation, Cato, all of that, none of that existed in 1971. Business was apolitical. Business leaders did not involve themselves in politics. It was just a completely different world. In fact, it was considered bad taste to involve yourself in politics if you were a business leader. So Powell writes this memo and kicks off the conservative movement. The next year, that was 71. 72, Richard Nixon puts him on the Supreme Court. 3 years before that happened, in the late 60s, Lewis Powell, when he was in private practice in Virginia, he had a young man who worked for him who was a law student, and mostly what he did was he delivered papers. He was like a gopher, you know, an elevated gopher, but he had a full-time job working for Lewis Powell. And they became very close. They became good friends. I mean, you know, Powell had this kind of boutique law firm, and this kid worked for him. He was 18, 19 years old. And one day the kid calls him up frantically and, you know, begs him to come over. Well, actually, no, Powell didn't go over and see what happened. One day the kid calls him up frantically and says, "I've got a real problem. I need to talk to you." And Powell says, "Come on into the office." So this kid comes into Lewis Powell's office and says, "I just left my girlfriend's apartment. She is dead on the bed. She bled out. I got her pregnant. We tried to do an abortion with a knitting needle. I thought I knew how to do it. I must have punctured something. She bled out and she is dead. And I don't know what to do." And Lewis Powell, the guy who created the modern conservative movement, this is 3 years before he was put on the Supreme Court, Lewis Powell said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of it." Picked up the phone, called the local sheriff, the local police, and said, "We've got a woman who has bled out from a self-administered abortion at such and such an address. You need to go pick her up. She has a boyfriend. He works for me, and I want you to just leave him alone. And that's what happened. That young man got away with, he was never drawn into this whole thing. The young woman was dead. She was given to her family, and they had a burial and all that. So 1973 comes. Lewis Powell got put on the court by Richard Nixon in 72. 1973, the court decides the Roe v. Wade case comes before the Supreme Court. And Lewis Powell tells this story to his colleagues on the court. And you've got this 7-9 decision for Roe v. Wade. Yes, it is the right of a woman to have an abortion. Most people are completely unaware of this story. I think it's fine. I think it's absolutely amazing.